Okay. Looks like he's getting ready to start. I'm going to go ahead and mute because he likes us to mute. Probably not you, but.
And good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another live Xanadu Gallery online critique group session. Today is Wednesday, March 23rd, 2022. Great to be back here with you on another Wednesday morning. We want to jump in and welcome our featured artist this morning, Linda Wren. And Linda is joining us, I believe, from Virginia. Is that correct, Linda? Oh, I've got you muted there. If you can go ahead and unmute.
Yes.
Yep. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
So, yes, from Richmond, Virginia.
Richmond, excellent. And Linda, let's begin talking just a little bit, if you can give us some of your background and how you came to be creating art.
Okay. Well, my education was in graphic and industrial design at Carnegie Mellon University. My career was in advertising. So for about 39 years, I worked in two dimensions, doing advertising for companies like Seiko and Mercedes, Turner Classic Movies. I started taking classes in ceramics here in Richmond at the Visual Arts Center in 2018. I had not had my hands in clay since high school. I tried to perfect the wheel, but got frustrated with my imperfection. Then COVID hit, the studio closed, and I wanted to keep working in three dimensions. I set up a studio at home and tried figurative sculpture, something I could hand build. Quickly realized I love the challenge of figuring things out, figuring out the anatomy and trying to convey emotions, figuring out the physics of ceramics, like how to have an arm suspended out and not crack off, figuring out how to do teeth and what subtle changes occur with different expressions. I've always been an observer. Ever slight changes can change mood or emotion. While many other figurative sculptures do stoic portraits, I wanted to capture a moment in time or to imbue the clay with emotion. Usually when I take pictures, I generally don't pose anyone or ask them to smile for the camera. I stay back and observe, waiting for the moment. Like the wonder of a child observing a butterfly that landed on their finger, or the joy of a child's laughter as their dog licks their face. I try to capture the same emotions in clay. Each character comes with a story, the same stories I conjure up in my mind when I'm creating them. They have an attitude. What kind of attire would he or she wear? How would they wear their hair? Their personality dictates those decisions. Of course, viewers are welcome to create their own story for any character that amuses them. Yeah. As a former designer, color, pattern, and texture are very important to me. I was frustrated by the limitations of glaze, as well as the unpredictability of how it will turn out. So I use acrylics on bisque-fired clay.
Huh. And so it sounds like you've had a creative background, even if you weren't working directly in the arts. Where does that come from? Do you come from a family of creators? Did that interest come to you at a very early age?
Yes, a very early age. My mom was an artist. She did fashion illustration in New York. So when I was very little, I'd like to say my parents dragged me to museums in Europe.
Yeah.
Because I was 8 and I didn't quite appreciate it then. But yeah, I've been exposed to art for a long time.
And so were you, throughout your professional career in marketing and advertising, were you doing any fine arts on the side or around the periphery, or just completely immersed in your career and not doing any fine art?
Completely immersed, pretty much, yeah. You needed to win awards in the shows to stay employed, so
when a lot of focus there.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's a great segue in, and let's go ahead and jump into your work. And if we can, maybe just tell us a little bit. You mentioned that there are stories for these pieces. So talk a little bit about, you already mentioned a little bit of the creative process, but each of these pieces, talk a little bit about the process for creating them.
Okay, this is not my mother, but it was inspired by her. She never went out of the house without being fully attired and made up. And again, you can see the patterns that I relate to. And the glasses are actually wood, and the little stems are, I think, brass, but.
And so are these works ceramics? So they're hand built. It wouldn't be a process of creating a model and a mold and casting them. They are each going to be hand built.
Yes. Yes. I might take a couple days to a week to create them, and then I let them dry for 3 months because they're rather thick, not like a mug or anything. And I let them dry slowly, and then I fire them. It's worked so far.
And what about the scale? Would this be fairly typical, 13, 14, 15 inches tall, or is there some range in scale?
I do pretty much everything about the same size proportion. I just find that works, and I know it fits in the kiln. And I use paper clay, which is a little more supportive and can hold extended arms out better.
And between these first 3 pieces, you can see that the first couple have a lot of character and story. This third one also has clearly a story to tell, but it's a different kind of story, a different tone.
Yes, that was inspired by 2020. And that is the only one that broke in the kiln. I think the kiln gods had something to say on that one. I intricately pieced it back together, and I think it works better as broken in 2020. Being isolated and everything else that the COVID did to us. So.
And then these next couple of pieces, again, have a little bit different feel and obviously a different approach to the composition of the works. Talk about these pieces.
Yeah, I do. I have a side line of tiles that are a little more interpretive. I can't quite say how I come up with them. I may react to a photograph that's not like this, but then how can I, maybe it's a word inertia that I want to portray, or I happen to like the pattern and the dimensionality of ivy on the wall. So it's sort of a mix. Sometimes I come up with a title first and then create it, or the creation leads to a title. This I like to doodle, and I thought it portrayed, dream state and all the things that go through your head and in dreams. So this one I just completed, and that was, I saw an image that was of this woman, but I take, maybe an expression from one, and then I have to create it in 3 dimensions. So I'm also married to a physical therapist who helps me with my anatomical challenges.
That's handy.
Yes. So he'll say, no, the clavicle needs a little more definition or whatever. So I have learned from him as well. And again, the pattern I really react to. So I have a lot of patterns in my work.
And so you've kind of already touched on this, but as you were starting to think about spending more time creating and as circumstances provided an opportunity to do that, did you come to this thinking, I want to create figurative work and ceramic would be an interesting medium to work in? Or was it that you wanted to work in ceramic and felt like figures were kind of a natural direction for you to go in? Maybe those are 2 ways of coming at the same thing, but Which kind of preceded the other?
Well, like I said, I started trying to work on the wheel, and I got frustrated because there were lots of other potters that had been doing it for a long time and had perfected it. And that's not really what I was trying to perfect it, but it's not really what I like to do. I don't like the constant production of doing ceramics. I like more of the challenge of trying to figure things out. How am I going to put this together? How am I going to extend the arm? How am I going to show this emotion? So I'm challenged with each piece. And I'm trying to think of the first one I did that the first figurative sculpture I did, it just resonated or inspired me to keep going in that direction.
So experimentation kind of took you in that direction and
Yes.
resonated. And we've got a couple of other images here just to get a sense a bit of presentation.
This was inspired by my son. I had a picture of him with a butterfly on his finger. And so the butterfly is wings are paper and the body is wood and then wire for the legs. And so my son was the inspiration for that.
And without having heard you speaking already, I might not have appreciated the challenges involved in having that arm extended the way that it is. That certainly that is not something that maybe we've seen a lot of in other ceramic work that we've experienced.
Well, the one thing that's the unknown is shipping. So I haven't posted any prices on the website because that's a conundrum of how to do that. Some of the UPS requires they pack it if I insure it for over a certain amount. So.
Yeah, certainly worth discussing the logistics of shipping, and we will do that. And then I think I've got, hold on here, one more piece to look at. And so let's start then with and invite the group in to comment on just some general reactions to the work. And I received a number of reactions via email. Leslie says, "I love that you've incorporated portraiture into your ceramic work. The glazes have a painterly feel to them. Brava." And I got a lot of reactions like that. Just intrigue with your technique and work and colors and compositions. I think the word here is kind of interesting. Portraiture. Do you think of these works as portraits?
I personally think of a portrait as what most sculptors do, is a stoic view. I've been actually asked to do portraits, but that I think it's more of the emotion or the intrigue or the personality that I try to portray.
Yes, and I think this is a really interesting and important distinction to draw as we're looking at work that depicts the human form and figure, and portraits, at least in my experience, portraits and figurative work require somewhat different approaches in terms of, obviously in terms of composition and creation, but also in terms of marketing and kind of the business model around them. So we're definitely going to want to talk about that. Melanie makes a suggestion, and we've got Melanie here, but Melanie says, would love to see a video of the process while she explains her inspiration. An interesting idea. We've got to see and hear a little bit about your work as you were explaining it to us. And certainly with work that we're encountering that is outside of our normal experience, it isn't an oil landscape painting or even a bronze figurative sculpture. You're going to find that the viewers of your work are going to have a lot of questions. What is it? How did you make it? What was your inspiration? And so I'm going to agree with Melanie that it's a great idea to be able to offer some of that as people are experiencing your work for the first time. Let me pull those of you who are here in the group in, and hold on, let me make sure I can see you. I would love to get your reaction to the work, just in terms of how it struck you, what you think in terms of the subject matter and the consistency of the work. And so if you're in the group and would like to make a comment, please click on the hand icon or hold your hand up in front of the camera and I'll try and pull you in. Love to hear some reactions. And if not, I'll volunteer you. Melanie, let's pull you in. We got your email comment, but let's hear what you think about the work.
Yeah, I may have said this to her when we were visiting before you started. I really like, just because, maybe it's just because I have an abstract brain, the two pieces, Dream State and Broken. I had said in the chat that I thought you intentionally broke those hands, which you might think about, because I mean, that really is emotional and has an impact. And I'm really glad you didn't dump the piece. I'm really glad you did, glue it back together. But so those two I can relate to more. And again, maybe it's just because I have an abstract brain, because they evoke an emotion, a response from me personally.
Okay, good. Beverly, let's go to you.
Hi. Yeah, I thought I'd chip in because I like different ones. And so I thought that was interesting that we like different ones. I really like the female figures. I like Irene and Mary Bell because I just find them fun and quirky. And you can see the background in fashion, in the clothing that they're wearing. So yeah, I like the ones that aren't quite so heavy.
Yes. Okay, good. Other responses, pieces that you like or questions that you might have about the work. Anyone else want to jump in? Okay, I'm getting silent. So let me ask you, as Linda, as you're kind of thinking about the work that you're creating, and as you kind of look into the future, do you have a feeling about what direction you'd like your work to take? Which approach is more interesting to you? How do you see your body of work developing over time? You're still very early in the creative process, and so I wonder what you think about what the future holds for you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I wondered that myself. I was on a roll and just ideas were popping into my head frequently, and I kept going, and then I had a little bit of a lull and trying to figure out, well, where do I go from here? And maybe I had done a lot of kids, and now I'm maybe moving into a little bit more serious, but then tomorrow could be different, and I could be inspired by a humorous sculpture to do. I sort of I ruminate on an idea for a long time and sort of wait for it to come together. In the meantime, I collect all the images because I don't have models, so I need an image from front, back, and side. So I have to find similar photos of those positions to figure out what the muscles are doing. And
yes, and so that raises a couple of interesting questions for me. One is, as you're in this process of thinking about the piece and doing research, are you sketching out the pieces and doing preliminary designs, or really do you just go straight to the clay?
Pinterest is my friend, so I collect all my reference images in there. And the different angles of, a person from front and back in a certain position, so I can get the muscles right. And I, need to determine, well, what kind of hair will they have? So I need to find a picture of that style of hair and, a fabric, and what would the fabric do when it's folded like that for this one. So I have a large palette of references in Pinterest that I use.
And then as you, actually, I should kind of throw this out to the group, but, as we're looking at this work, I kind of see, obviously, two distinct, different, perhaps we could think of them as two series of work where we've got the pieces in the round, the sculptural pieces and the relief pieces. And not only are they different in terms of format, but there's a different feel to the composition and the thematic elements of that work. Do you see it that way? Is there one of those bodies of work that you're pursuing more consistently? And so I'll just, if we hop between these two pieces, there's some distinction between the two. And so do you have a sense that you'll be more actively pursuing one over the other, or do you kind of plan to pursue both?
I plan to pursue both. Doing the tiles is a little easier. I don't have to figure out the anatomical positions of everything. So after I've done a complex anatomical sculpture, I might take a mental break and do a tile and do more painterly, or be more painterly in that.
And move back and forth between both.
Back and forth, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then now we also know that you are early in your art career. Have you had the opportunity to show and display and share your work? And have you sold any of your work up to this point?
I honestly have not sold a whole lot. I've sold a little bit. I was due to be in 2 shows this past year and got everything all ready. And at the last minute, it was canceled due to COVID. So I'm hoping there's a large juried show here that will now be in October. So in the meantime, they sit in my studio.
Yes, keep you company. Okay, good. Okay, so that brings me to where I'd like to kind of take probably the bulk of the rest of the conversation, and that is that you're at an interesting phase where, every artist here has been through this phase, the early kind of the genesis of the work and the beginning of the process of deciding on direction and honing skills and kind of thinking about bringing it all together. And so I wonder, for those of you who are here who've maybe been at it a little bit longer, what advice might you give to Linda in terms of pursuing her art, building, potentially a career around that art? What words might you offer to her? And you might also think of it in terms of if you could go back in time and talk to yourself when you were at the same point Linda was, what would you tell yourself? What's important? What would you want yourself to know as you're thinking about launching a vocation in the arts? Josh, let me go to you. Josh was featured here a couple of weeks ago, also a sculptor. And so what words of advice would you have for Linda?
My thoughts would be to not only do just like a fine art show, but actually do a craft or trade show in the arts. And I think you get a little bit more interaction with your clientele. And I think they could help you maybe choose which style to kind of focus on the most and learn a lot about your presentation and things like that. I'm really drawn to the slightly more abstract, like of your work, like Ziri or Dream State. And I think, knowing where your clientele is really good so that you can hone in and really love your work, but also be selling it. Yeah,
very interesting advice. And Josh, we're going to assume you're speaking from some experience of having had some interactions in those kinds of events.
Yeah, the trade shows are irreplaceable as far as learning what people are seeing, how they're responding. I find in my work, getting something like somebody to attach to a certain part of your work is really crucial. And some of the work seems so specific that unless that person walked up, I don't know if they're going to buy it. Where the more ambiguous, like Zuri, more people could attach to it and fall in love with it and take it home.
Okay, that's a really interesting point, Josh, and that kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier, this idea of there being a distinction between figurative work and portraiture. And I might echo what Josh is saying, that portraiture does pose some additional challenges in the sense that, well, maybe it would be useful. What is the difference between portraiture and figurative work? Anyone want to hop in with some ideas of the distinctions and characteristics of each of those different kinds of work, and what you might suggest to Linda in terms of what you're seeing in her work? No takers? Too much on the spot? Terry, let me go to you, and then I'll go to Jim.
Yeah, I work in a gallery, and as well as being an artist, and I think I'm also drawn to the more abstract pieces, only because unless on your website you show staging for some of your more specific pieces, like the boy with the missing tooth that's on your website, those are very specific stories that's hard for another person to join in on unless they also have a boy with a missing tooth. But I think if you show staging on your website and divide your work into series, I'm not good at the difference between portraiture and figurative. I'm just thinking in terms of an artist seeing that or a consumer seeing that piece in their home or their office or somewhere.
By staging, you mean, I'm not real clear on.
So staging means to me that you would set up one of your pieces with a backdrop in somebody's home, or a couple of your pieces together, like somebody's collected, fictitiously somebody's collected 4 of the pieces, like Irene, and I've forgotten what the name of the other one was now, but of that type of piece, you see them sitting together, or you see one sitting on a pedestal by itself with a background, so that we actually picture these pieces in our home. Okay. And it's something that, because I am a timid consumer of this type of art, even though I enjoy it, if I saw it in somebody's home, I'd go, oh, I see where that can go in my home.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion, and photography of 3-dimensional work it's a critical issue, and you've done a great job of kind of isolating the pieces and giving us a very professional backdrop, so that we get a real sense of the piece. But it's an interesting idea that Terry's proposing, that also showing the pieces in some kind of context. I would say it would be beneficial to show both, so that we can both get the sense of the detail of the work and also have a sense of context. Could definitely be helpful for someone who's considering the work for their own home. Jim, let me go to you. Oh, Jim, sorry, we've got you muted still. If you can unmute. There we go.
Yes. A couple of the pieces that I really were drawn to was the Zuri. I mean, that's really just a beautiful, the delicate way you handled her mouth and the textures and the hair and the thing that struck me with your son and the butterfly is how the base works so beautifully into the swing of his arm coming around, and how the base works very nicely with that piece. A few of the pieces I found those bases to be a little more static. They just kind of like the square base, the simple bases. But I love the ones that, even with the older woman with the glasses, that base, how it works with the piece itself. Mm-hmm. Those I really like. The only one that really kind of throws me is the penguin one. I would probably consider steering away from that type of thing myself. Just looking at it, I just thought this looks something that would be more in a gift shop rather than a gallery. But that's all personal pride. I mean, that's all the way you look at it.
Yeah.
But I would probably veer away from the animals personally.
And that's an interesting point too. Here's a departure, right? Where we could say, okay, that is very distinctly different, and we can even see some differences, as we go between the 3-dimensional pieces and the more abstracted bas relief. Although I wonder if all of us early in our career need to do some of this kind of experimentation and need to have some work in there where we say, I'm going to give myself the liberty to not be consistent. I may or may not be interested in penguins and giraffes, but how will I know? And how will I know how effective they are until I give it a shot and give it a go? And I do think there's some real benefit early in your career and even sometimes later in your career as you're thinking, I'm getting a little stiff and stale and tired. I need to jump in and just throw off the shackles, if you will, of my consistent body work and try something. And so, I wouldn't be afraid to maybe have some pieces that are outside the realm of what you're normally doing. And maybe they're even failures, but you'll learn a lot, I think, through those opportunities to experiment. Beverly, did you want to hop in on that as well?
Yes, I've just been thinking the same thing, that it's delightful to be at the early stages where you're actually not pinned down and you're not thinking, oh, I've got to produce 15 pieces for a gallery. You can really play and enjoy what you're doing. And I think it would be a shame to rush too quickly to saying, oh, this is what I'm doing, and then maybe shut yourself off from possibilities. So I would say relax into it, really enjoy this stage of learning and experimenting, which you clearly are doing at the moment, when you talk about collecting your references. So yes, it's nice to sell things, but you're still very early in your career. So I think it's just fun to explore.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that. And obviously we want to learn from that exploration, and some things will work and some won't. And as Josh said, taking opportunities to participate in a variety of different venues and shows where you can start to get some feedback from your audience is valuable. I think I do want to come back around, though, to this question of, let's just take Irene here as an example. Is she a portrait? And I would say, as I'm looking at her, I would say, yeah, probably if I met the inspiration for this piece, I might be able to recognize her and draw the parallels and know who she is and know this was her. But there is something about, especially these first two pieces, Irene and Maribel, that is that at least in my experience of interacting with them visually, it goes beyond the portraiture. It is not, to me, these two pieces, it's not about who this person is. It's about Linda's expression of having captured something there that goes beyond, that feels more universal than just the specific person that she happens to be depicting. And the feeling is a little bit whimsical. It's about the gesture. It's about delightful. And I would not hesitate. And I know that many of our collectors at Xanadu, where we have some artists who are doing some very whimsical, playful work, I would just think that they might be delighted to welcome these women into their homes. That they're going to bring a smile and a sense of playfulness and their own story. They almost become members of the family as they come into the home. And so I wouldn't worry quite so much. And I think we're seeing an interesting dividing line here among us where it seems like about half of us are more interested in the more abstracted, more, kind of expressionist works. And the other half of us are more drawn to the figures and the gesture here. And so that, again, I'm going to go back to Josh and agree with him that, boy, the only way we could know how the public at large is going to be responding to the work is to put it in front of them and see where the interest is and what their responses are to the work. And not that I would necessarily want to be driven solely by those responses, but I would imagine you're going to get some very interesting feedback as people see and experience your work that will spark inspiration and creativity and create this kind of feedback loop where you say, I want to create more of that kind of response. And sitting here today, I'm not sure that any of us could guess which of these works are going to, more effectively strike the general public. The only way to know would be to get it out there and to start to get responses.
I wish I had a formula for Irene, because I really know what it is about her that I have the most reaction from.
Well, I would say create another 100, 150 pieces, and you'll probably start to narrow in on that, that formula, both by figuring out what isn't it, and then finding piece by piece what it is that is it. Comments, reactions, agreement, disagreement. Gay, let me go to you. Looks like we've still got you muted. There we go.
I think they're fabulous. The only thing about the, I just love them. So far from anything I'd ever do. I just think they're great. The only thing I personally think might be a difficult sell for some people are the plaques kind of thing, because they remind me, I hate to say this, they remind me of death masks. For me personally, and I think, oh yeah, I don't want that on my wall, but somehow keep going, because I think you're going to end up merging everything in some way. Because I see you in all of them, and that's wonderful. And I think the woman, is it Irene?
Yeah, Irene is getting a lot of attention.
Oh, she's so retro, darling. I had glasses like that 50 years ago, honey. I married with them, that show. So 48 years ago. So I look at, she's so retro, and I think the staging is important, because these people who have no idea who this woman is, I could see her in their retro interior or their eclectic environment, and they would just be right at home with her. The only other thing I'm going to say is my big sadness when I graduated from, I won't say where, because they may have changed now, but wasn't the courses I took, it was the absence of any business course. And I, through the years, nobly went on, and I'm going to give a plug for Jason, but until I found this course, and this is like 30 odd years, I didn't have any concrete help putting everything in together. I knew what to do, and I made running goes at it, but not systematically. Now, of course, I wasn't working at this 40 hours a week. I had 3 million other things to do, but so I am making a plug for something which I found tremendously helpful, even at my late stage of career. So.
Yeah, and thank you, Gay. And I, that is a very interesting challenge, right? That every artist is going to have early on is there's almost this underlying sentiment out there that, hey, just learn how to make great art. The rest will take care of itself. And to a certain extent, I would echo that in that, yes, the foundation for being able to sell and promote your artwork is absolutely the work itself. The quality's got to be there. The creativity has to be there. Yes. But certainly, as you're getting started, if you can learn from other artists and other people in the industry and draw on their wisdom and experience, you don't necessarily have to go through all of the missteps and misdirections that every other artist has gone through if you can learn from them and take advantage of that. And that is the opportunity to be in a group like this or local groups of artists. I highly encourage that interaction. The collective wisdom that you can draw from can be very, very powerful. Linda, are you connected with other artists? Do you have mentors or colleagues?
I wish I did. The Visual Arts Center where I took, ceramics, I love that venue. But once I got into figurative sculpture, I really don't know a lot of other people that do figurative sculpture, other than the Facebook online communities like Sculpting in Clay and some other online communities that have been beneficial when I ask a question. But other than that, I miss that connection.
Yeah, definitely. And the last couple of years have proven that it can be even a little bit more challenging at times. But I would encourage you to look for those opportunities to interact. As you go and participate in shows, you'll have an opportunity to see other artists who are doing work. It won't be the same as yours, obviously. You're doing something that is unique, but that would have a harmonious, clientele and that you could certainly draw from. Terry.
Yeah, I was just on that line. We have a group of 4 artists here that, because we've been at shows together and receptions and that kind of thing, we formed a group that meets once a month. We talk about business and goals, and at the end of each meeting, we're not the same type of artist. There's a figurative art, I mean, a 3-dimensional artist, 2 painters, and a collage artist. But long story short, we, at the end of each of our meetings, we each set a business goal or a creativity goal for the next time. And it can be very small, but that type of support and accountability to a group, at least for me, has been invaluable. And we're all looking at how to be the most creative and still sell.
Yeah.
Still try to get our work.
Balance.
Yeah. So that support group has, and then like Gay, I'll put in a plug for Jason's class because it's invaluable.
No paid sponsorship here, but thank you very much for your kind words.
Yes.
But yes, I think, and we are quickly running out of time, but I think, and we didn't even have a chance to talk about pricing, but you've got some definitely some great opportunities ahead of you, Linda. You've got a body of work already started that drew our interest and discussion. You've got unique work, and that poses a whole set of both challenges and opportunities. And I think that it seems like the consensus that we're coming to is keep creating, keep experimenting, have fun with what you're doing. Think about and put some effort into, thinking about the business side of art now as you start building your career. Learn as much as you can, and then keep pushing forward and draw on the community to help you get where you want to go. And obviously, where we want to go is going to be different for all of us. But as you start to think about what you could accomplish with your work, there's just so many opportunities opening up for you. And so thank you, Linda, so much for sharing your artwork with us. We'll look forward to seeing your work as it continues to develop.
Thank you so very much. I really appreciate everybody's input.
Yes, thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us. Of course, we'll be back here next Wednesday with another artist's work to review. You can catch archives of all the past sessions on the broadcast page.